Andrea, and I'm the owner and director of Waves of Harmony. And with me today is Greg Roberts.
Yeah, and I'm the owner and director of Grief and Trauma Support.
We're here today to talk about presence in therapy. Yes, it's been a topic that kind of grew out of another topic we discussed, actually. So we've been talking a little bit about what qualities or personality types go into therapy and how we as therapists sort of present ourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
What are some...
And this sort of felt like, and it might come across that way as like a bit of, for want of a better term, like a deeper dive into what it is. Like we started out talking about what are the intrinsic qualities of a therapist, or what are our intrinsic qualities. But I think over time talking about, we realised that there's something there about presence and how we're present. Yeah.
Actually, it was you who brought that into my awareness more than anything, because we were talking about all those qualities, and then sort of you led into, I think this idea of presence is really kind of key. And I think we'll discuss this today, the idea of being present in therapy and how we are. And I love this idea, first of all, because I'm all about holism, about the whole person, and being with all of the parts of ourselves, the mental, the cognitive, the physical, the sensory, the emotional and spiritual, and all those aspects that have to do with that. And really, it seems like presence is more of a sense rather than a tangible thing. So this is why I really wanted to kind of delve into this one first. And I think it really sets the stage for all the other qualities or all of the other things that come about in the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, like you said, there's more being written about it, but it's not, I don't know whether it's something that you learn in a sort of step-by-step way, but like you said, there's more, there are things you can do to be more aware of the sense of what it is and recognising it, almost that sort of approach.
Yeah. And I think after our talk today, I think that people, clinicians especially, will walk away with the sense of how they can apply this more in their practice, or look at themselves a little bit more personally even, and how that is brought into therapy. So I think the idea of that presence is attractive to discuss, because it's about being with the person. Like we're sitting in these chairs together, and this is much like a therapy sort of setup where we're sort of conversing and talking and getting ideas. And it's a lot of times we fall back on these frameworks and tools as part of, like you were saying, like our education or our training comes from that sort of how to do things and what to do in therapy, whereas presence is implying more of a being with. So we're just how we're sitting with people. So this is a lot about what we're talking about today, and it was noted actually in a recent study, the Geller and Greenberg study in 2022 paper said, being fully present with the client requires you as a therapist to bring your whole self to the encounter, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and relationally. Your clients will feel safe and more secure with you, supporting the difficult work of therapy. And goes on to say, sounds straightforward enough, but keep in mind it asks you to focus on how you are with your client rather than just what you do in the therapy session, unquote. So today we are here to discuss what qualities have been found to be associated with presence and how we are in sessions with clients. In other words, how we are, what does it look like, more than what do we do? How does that play out? So there's been, for this conversation today, and we've done some conversations in the past where we sort of come up with things on our own, but today we're kind of leaning on some of the research papers written on this topic. So Greg, I'm interested if you would like to delve into some of the things that have been reported in those articles that you've actually shared with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we'd like to do is sort of start there and then move, as you're saying, more into what our sense of it is in practice as well. And Yeah, we've got some notes here because like the studies that we're looking at are quite recent as well.
Yep.
There's been a bit written over time, but these are quite recent ones. So
Mm.
Chris Bradshaw did a study where the idea that there are these different themes of what clients might experience when their therapist is fully present to them.
Mm.
So some of the things that Bradshaw mentions is around feeling safe, and I might come back to that in a moment. A sense of being deeply seen and heard, and that includes being supportively challenged, which I think has a loop to safety in a way. You know that.
Yep.
So what I was going to say about safety is there's something there for me around feeling like you're with another person who is present in a way that you feel you can be a bit vulnerable, like you can allow vulnerability, which then I think maybe allows the supportively challenged or challenging parts to actually look at what's happening. Also mentions the benefits of the idea of being fully here now, so being both. So that brings two things. It's like it's present to the other person, but in the present.
As in time, not in the past or the future, but present,
whatever
current
is
situation.
Now. Yeah.
In the room, in the moment.
In the moment.
Yeah.
And then also talks about what I would say is like the environment we create by being present. So safe spaces or places, but I think that often can come from how we're present and the sort of environment that brings. Interestingly, talks about the idea of no filter, you know, that really allowing whatever comes in us in response to the other, and also inviting that from the other person as well. And mentions this idea of yin and yang, of present relationships. And for me, with my Tai Chi background, I think of, you know, I'm not sure people listening what their understanding of yin and yang is, but it's a natural backwards and forwards flow, but it's not static or your turn, my turn.
Right.
It's more an experience of you sense something from the other person, it arrives in you and it invites something back. So it's almost like there's an energy coming in about something, you experience it and sense it and are present to it, and that invites you to offer something back, or and you just, that keeps flowing. So it's not as simple as, oh, your turn, my turn, but it's just a natural cycling through.
I just have to say so far that just that those points from the Bradshaw study and that was in 2024, have like really already, and the way that you described it has already made me sort of reflect on what we often call intuition in ourselves, or just that sense or that ability as a therapist to sort of feel free and okay with whatever comes up, and to use that energy. And like you were saying, it's sort of a dynamic flow, isn't it? It's not static, and it means, I think in that sense, I'm not sure if it means this, but I'm kind of thinking it means that we're not getting stuck, which I think can often happen in therapy if we kind of really grind into something really cognitively or try to get our point across, rather than opening up to that situation in its present space. So I really love that already, that again we're talking about like the being with.
Yes.
And I think in those spaces, and this, I don't know, this is something that maybe I didn't really understand as a young therapist, because I relied on those tools and frameworks more, but just being with things, it sometimes doesn't, it feels risky.
Yes.
And it can feel a little bit of like, oh, what am I doing here? What am I offering as the, therapist and all that? So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I just wanted to sort of tease that out a little bit in some responses. But there's another study. I think
Yeah,
you wanted
so
to.
the other study by Shari Geller, which is 2025, like
Right
very,
now.
right now, very
Yes.
recent.
In fact, it was on my birthday. It came out
There we go.
in May.
So very, very
Yeah.
recent. And there she talks about the focus on safety and a connection to polyvagal theory, of which to me, in looking at that paper, is it's both presence, but I'm adding in the word sort of resonance of at a polyvagal level that there is a presence from the other person, and probably what I said earlier, that in us being present, we start to create an environment where the other person's system feels like it can ease and maybe become a bit more open rather than having to guard or protect. And that probably links to when I was saying about vulnerability as well. There's a level of, okay, it's safe enough to actually be a bit open, a bit vulnerable, that I'm getting this sense from the other person. But I think what's important for us is for us to, this is again that yin and yang thing, for us to be doing the same. To being open to whatever the other person is going to share with us, and continuing that that presence and that environment for both of us in the session to feel safe enough and be able to say things or share things that are coming up.
How can our clients be comfortable and feel open if we're not comfortable and open, in other words?
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
And she talks about the fact that therapeutic presence can strengthen the therapeutic relationship. And does mention, which we're talking about, I think it's Bradshaw's idea of yin and yang. Geller talks about this bi-directional attunement, which is similar. You know, it's that back and forth. It's going both ways.
Yeah. That energy, you mean, not the back and forth as in the conversation necessarily, but that
it's that flow of energy
presence,
and resonance happening between the two. And she talks about also that the therapist's presence and neurophysiological experience of safety allows the client to engage in therapy, which is back to what I was saying at the beginning.
Neurophysiological, so that's like basically bringing it all together.
Yeah, which is that
Body-mind
connection to polyvagal theory. As you said, holism, it's like the whole being of the other person feels like, oh, I can be here. And back to that idea of being fully here now for both parties to be in that space.
And I think about polyvagal therapy, where I've heard it a lot in my reading and my awareness, is in sort of more the yoga space, and thinking about the vagus nerve and relaxing the rest and digest, being calm and at ease, and our parasympathetic, our sympathetic system is like being at ease instead of being in flight, freeze, fawning. And we don't want our clients to come in with that. So we also want to exude that sort of presence ourselves, of feeling we're at ease, our nervous system is calm. Because if we're like all like, you know,
and I think
wired up, it's not going to be a good transfer of energy there either, is it?
And I think that even if a person we're seeing comes in that heightened state, that can be okay, but that being met by a presence that is open enough to go, that's okay that you're like that. So that I think all the papers that I'm looking at, and from experience, that if we can be that way, over often a fairly short period of time, the person starts to come out of that heightened state, because rather than going in and going, oh, we've got to do something to calm you down, it's interesting to think about what would happen if we just go, that's okay that you're like that.
To meet that a little bit.
Come in, be here, and be how you are, and let's be with
Interesting.
that.
So there's a lot there. even within presence, there's so much to unpack, and
Yeah.
we're just touching on some major points today to get sort of tease you into thinking a little bit more deeply about it, perhaps, or just having a closer examination of. I think what we've presented so far, I can think in my therapy space how often perhaps I can improve that. Because it's hard, and I think it, like she said at the beginning, it sounds straightforward enough, but I think we often do go to those frameworks and we go into those. What can I do? How can I help? How can I shift this? How can I reframe this instead of just being? And so I think it's a big lesson. Certainly something I'm very aware of right now in my own growth, I think. So knowing all these points are important. So thinking about what we've said so far, and safety is a big one, but a lot about just being with the energy in the space and how we do that. How does this look? So I'm just like, again, sort of picking apart how I look at my therapy space and thinking about how I use this idea of music therapy, but how would you go about it, Greg? What might it look like without sort of the doing, I guess, but how does it look when we are being with?
And I always think whenever I touch into this or think about it or share anything about it, immediately it feels tricky to describe because again, it's a sense of something. And so then converting that into language
it's tricky.
Is tricky. So what I'm doing at present is thinking, like I've recently had a first session with someone where there's a bereavement that's quite recent. So had never met this person before. We had a bit of an exchange on the phone. And this would be typical, I guess, of my way of being, that right at the beginning I notice in me there is a sort of opening up of moving into what I would call a sort of an unknowing, like letting go of anything I might have heard about the person through a referral or even what they've said in a phone exchange or anything like that, of just, okay, I actually don't know how they are today. And a little something that I usually do, and you might even notice when we catch up, and I think we both do it a little bit, is just a starting point of even, how's your day been so far? As a little opening to let the person sort of come in and connect to, oh yeah, okay. You know, how has my day been? How am I?
Sort of a check-in.
Just a gentle.
Where are we?
Little check-in. There's also a little bit of starting to create an environment where I need to being able to say, after I've checked in of how the day's been, sometimes they'll ask me, and this is part of being present. It's absolutely good and fine, I think, when they ask me how my day has been, to be honest about that, and go, oh, actually, I've had a few appointments, had a little bit of a break before you, but my day's been pretty good, or whatever it is, just to be, don't have to go into detail, but give a sense of, I'm a human being like you, and I've had a day like you've had a day up to this point, and here we are. And so then I might move into just, if I need to, sort of set the scene about asking, have you ever had counselling before, and then sharing a bit about, okay, so here's how I approach these sessions, and trying to give this sense of, I'm noticing even my words, it's probably not even trying, but giving a sense of openness, of like, I talk about things, particularly in grief and bereavement, of like, I don't see myself as an expert here. Because grief's very individual, so I'm really interested in what your experience is. And then together we can look at, what's been happening for you, how you are at present. So I try and do that. And then it really is a sense of, okay, so what is it that is there for you at present? Like coming into the session, were there things that you feel like you want to let me know about, I want to share with me.
Mm.
And really from that point, I think is where we drop more into this presence, that once the person starts sharing, I want to be open and just let in and notice. And part of it is like checking back at times of like, oh, okay, I just want to check what you just said. And it's often sharing my sense of going, oh, so you just said this, so my sense is what you're saying or what you're telling me is this, I'm wondering. And they'll either correct me or go, yeah, it's like that, and then they can continue.
Yeah.
So it's giving this sense of I'm here, I'm hearing you, I'm paying attention, I'm open. I think over time, one of the things I've become more mindful of, be interested to hear your experiences in music therapy, but is how, just as a human, some things that people share without us realising can bring a reaction in us. So it's even a moment when someone might say something that where we go, oh.
Of course. Because we're only human too. And I think that response is authentic and natural. That's part of the open.
Yeah. I think what's important when we have those moments of oh or wow, to add something to that for the person of like let them finish and then go, yeah, like I really noticed, and that's why I said wow, because that's I was getting the sense that sounds like that. That's big.
That's big, yeah. We sort of categorize our response with if it feels it needs it.
So it's like that clarifying our reaction.
And I wanted to sort of say something to that too, is that in that way we're not, what you're saying is that you're hearing something the person's saying and you might be drawing some conclusions in your mind, but you're not assuming anything.
No.
You're checking back in with them to see if they're going to correct you or if you're on the right train of thought, because as therapists, we don't know everything. And I think one of the things you said at the beginning, especially you talk about a first meeting, which is often when I feel it's the hardest to be with the person, but actually the most critical time to be with person, because as therapists, we're trying to gather so much information. What's really important? Is all that information really important? Or is it just about that? How does the conversation unfold? How do we allow the conversation to unfold? In fact, like you're saying, it's sensing things, and like you've gone through a few of the, the steps in those initial conversations that can occur with somebody in an initial meeting. And I think, like I'm saying, that initial meeting is where we get to sort of give that person that impression of safety. And sometimes I feel like if we're not switched on and we're not having a great day, or we're in a heightened state, those first meetings can feel clunky or feel a little bit tricky, I think, because we're not really present in that space. So it's really important in those first meetings to take time before that meeting starts and really allow the space to. I think that's how I feel about it. And I know I've run into stuff sometimes and felt ill-prepared, or that like, oh, I'm thinking too much about what their story is, what they're coming with. And I want to say this, I wonder if you're thinking it, and if maybe a lot of people are thinking it, what's the pressure on me when I'm sitting in that space? What are they expecting from me? What do they want to get out of me? And especially this one for me, what are they paying for? Am I getting something out of this? And I think that's where it can feel tricky to be present, because often that can feel like I'm not giving them value for their money. And I think that's a tricky one, because that's in a first meeting. What am I going to give this person? Instead of just looking at sort of like, oh, nice, tell me more about that. Sort of the typical sort of like cliche therapist sort of things. With that, being present but not seeming too, I want to use the word sort of too much like an airhead and too uninterested.
It's interesting because I think as you were saying that, what was happening in me is it's like, yes, it's actually more... It is, not the right word, but the closest I can get is it's work when we're present. Whereas I think when you try
to... just spacing out and just being like,
that's
whatever happens, happens.
Because you're dropping into something and being present to another person in a way that it's taking your energy and your ability to sort of set aside other things and really allow that person to be who they are. And that's part of what you're offering them is every part of you is actually welcome here, and I'm offering you this space with a view to actually, in doing that can be the basis of finding what you need. Because sometimes finding what you need gets shrouded in the shoulds or
what we
ought
expect.
tos or what others expect of us. But if you can start from a basis of actually however you are is welcome, let's start there. And then once we're there, what does that self or that being need to be able to thrive, I think, or live or grapple with whatever the person's grappling with. And that's where the work is. Whereas sometimes I think what you're saying, sometimes it can feel a bit more superficial of like, how does that feel? But it's disconnected.
Rather than connected.
Which is work.
Again, going back to that Geller statement from the beginning, I feel it's so important to reiterate the simple words of it sounds straightforward enough.
Yes.
And what I want to actually, when you were speaking, I just thought there's a great analogy here because it feels like what I often say in meditation. We're doing something by doing nothing. And meditation can feel like really difficult at the beginning when you are doing that, to do something by doing nothing. And in a way, this is similar, I think. Because we're doing a lot, but we're not doing.
Well, I'm interested, like, for you with music therapy, how, because I'm feeling like it's presence also offers some space or like an environment for something to come forward or offer itself as, okay, this is actually what I need. And I imagine in music therapy, sometimes both your presence, but maybe, I think you were talking earlier of how the music itself can be like a third presence in the space that also invites an opening to something.
It's interesting just how you put that instead of me saying it. When you said it about bringing music into the room, it's interesting because just now my body had a reaction to that, which made me almost feel like I was inviting a whole other thing into the room with that person. And sometimes there's a time for that when it's comfortable, and there's a time when that's too confronting. So it's interesting because like a third party in the room, it's like, oh, now we have this in the room with us, and that can sometimes feel overwhelming. So a lot of music therapy is based on music, but it can be based first on growing that relationship and that therapeutic discussion and growing that rapport. But then there's other times where the music just glides right into the room and sits nicely as another presence. And through that, it's objectified a little bit. It's objectifying things or reflecting things that are happening. If I had a diagram, it would sort of be it's interactive within all of us. It's coming into and around all of us. That energy is passing now between the music and us and between us. And there's so many different things happening. And it's not just a sensory, it's a total sensory experience because it's the experience of hearing the lyrics and cognitively kind of hearing them sometimes if there are lyrics. But it's sensing and feeling what's happening in music and then thinking about how that interplay with the person and what they're bringing in on that day, in that moment. So I think very interesting, like just now we had a very interesting
and even
catalyst moment in my therapy.
Following on from what you were saying, I feel like I want to say there's this feeling of when you talked about the music coming in, going back to the topic, I think there's something about bringing our presence and the sense of the opening and the safety and the vulnerability that when that's there, it's like you said, it's like not like nothing happens, but in that presence and that space, something else arrives or something else gets called for. And I think we said earlier for you, and I was thinking back to when we first met, and I remember talking somewhat about this of when you arrived at someone's house as a music therapist, that sometimes just your presence would be the first thing. And yet there might be an expectation from the person that like, oh, you're a music therapist, so where's the music? But sometimes it would start with your presence, and then through your presence and interaction with the other person, what arrives is, oh, this feels like a space where the music comes in. And whether it's music or in counselling, it might be a thought or an idea, something arrives in that presence and in that space that then goes somewhere and offers something different, perhaps.
I think that was part of going in to meet somebody is more about, like what I said before, about getting that information and not making assumptions, that they're going to want to see a girl with a guitar and singing songs. Rather, let's hear what's going on for you, and maybe the right tool is actually listening to your own music, or building a playlist, or writing a song, or using a piano, or using percussion, or using different instruments. So a lot of music therapists is sort of stock standard, walk in with your guitar. And I think then that sort of leads to me singing songs on the guitar, which doesn't necessarily fit the moment. So I think the presence is an interesting one, and I keep going back to again that first meeting, because I think that's where it all begins. And it's really, and we often do talk about, especially when we're working in palliative care, I know we talk about single session therapy where we go in one time. So in that case, I might have my instruments with me because I know I'm only going to have that one time, or I've always got instruments with me so I can go get them at any point. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But I might leave some of that for now, because I think we've gotten we've squeezed a lot out of that, just that little bit. And again, it's because I think this presence topic can potentially be a lot larger than life. We can go on in many different ways about it. But I think we'll go on to the next point, which is really about, we've talked about sort of what the research is saying, what's kind of out there, how that safety is a big thing in presence, and being open and being listening deeply and providing that space for things to evolve, and then how that sort of looks, and learning just now about how that sometimes happens. But why is this all really important, I guess, is sort of, I guess, why we're doing this talk. And I think going back to Shari Geller, in an earlier book that she wrote in 2017, stated, relational presence evokes a sense of connection and a sense of being seen and seeing, as no other human experience does. It's ultimately the shared presence that leads to therapeutic change. I mean, obviously somebody's walked in our door because they're looking for something, and like you said, identifying that. But Geller says it so well with that sort of idea of, it's all about the connection and the therapeutic relationship.
And that creates something different, or gives the opportunity for change.
If we just walk in with our toolbox, sure, we'll have some effective sessions, I'm sure. I'm sure that we'll still be able to do things, but I'm guessing that it won't happen as deeply.
And that's interesting. It just popped in for me of like, even if we do that, that's still presence. I think though it's a different type of presence. So I'm realizing the presence we're talking about has particular qualities to it. So we're using the word presence, but even if you turn up with your toolkit and, let's do this activity and this activity.
You could be present.
That's a type of presence.
Yes.
But it also has more an emphasis. It's a presence that is about doing more than being. I think.
And going on to the next point, why it's important, I think, is just to remember that the comfort is by action rather than words doing.
Yes.
like the action, not the action doing, but the action of being. Jinx, buy me a Coke. Like I was thinking back to thinking about parents and children and thinking about how we demonstrate things better than we do telling. So being calm and like I was saying about our presence of calmness and openness is then transferred over to just like we know what people often mirror us if we start mirroring or we start being really like that whole sort of exchange happens, right? On that sort of idea of doing rather than saying it.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think the interesting one that's there as well that we could talk about because it's fascinating is that the idea of being present in a therapeutic relationship is the best burnout prevention. So Shari Geller sort of sharing that it prevents burnout.
Or Chris Bradshaw, actually.
Was it Chris Bradshaw? Yeah.
You mentioned that, yeah.
I think what it's about is, and we chatted about this earlier, by being very present to the other person and the present moment and the experience with another person, we can be with what's there, even if it's really difficult and confronting things, but have our own experience of that in the moment and the other person has their experience, but then being able to be somewhat clearer about that experience is its own experience. And we're not having things out of our awareness that we're sort of holding, that then maybe can stay sticky after we walk away from being with a client. It's not to say it prevents it completely, but I think it certainly lessens burnout. Interestingly, by being more present and open to what another person brings. And there's a mutuality here as well, of recognizing you're in an experience with another person and being able to be affected in the moment by that and allowing yourself to be affected.
That's like
rather than cutting off or holding.
And that's like that vulnerability that we know often our clients bring in, but that we're showing then. Which I think is important too. That creates that connection, like that energy of I'm vulnerable too. I'm going to dive into this with you.
And this is present, and it's okay to be present to it. Again, it gives that sense of it's okay. You're experiencing it, and I'm picking up a sense of it, and we can both. And I think part of it, this presence, is certainly in grief and bereavement. I often talk about this sense for the other person of you're not alone with this. Being a very, almost a primal part of being a human being, like of how distressing it can be if you feel like you're completely alone with something. If someone else can be with you, it doesn't have to be fixed, but it changes how it feels when you no longer feel like you're alone with it and that it's just you.
There's a validation in that, and a reassurance in that, and a support. Like that's what you're all about. Grief and trauma support. It's about being supportive. It's not necessarily anything beyond that. In some cases, that can be enough to sit with. And I think there's been so many times in my therapy career, especially working in palliative care, where I felt like I was getting burned out, and I don't know if it was advice or if it was just kind of people saying, well, maybe just create a bubble. And I think we've all as clinicians kind of had this idea of being in a bubble and protecting ourselves and sort of, being on guard of the stuff that can get in. And I can't tell now if that actually contributed to my burnout more, but I'm willing to say that I don't know if it's exactly the right way about things. I know I didn't feel as authentic, and that I did rely more on tools and frameworks in those spaces, and maybe not being as present, which then sort of shut off that sort of exchange with my with the people I was working with. So maybe something to explore, that therapy bubble, and a bit of our own stuff, like this, going along with this whole idea of burnout and our self-care is actually going in deeper, but being in the moment actually more helpful for us as therapists
Yes.
in our own health.
Yeah.
So,
Something about being very real in the moment
yeah, exactly.
rather than storing it
Yeah, or creating a wall.
or creating a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think this goes along with one of the last points that I think are important, why this topic is important, is that it's something that's just become part of my own awareness recently, which after being a therapist for so long is quite amazing. It's my awareness is how I am with myself and how that directly impacts on how I am in therapy. And I just want to quote Sherry Geller again. She's got so many good quotes. And all these references will be displayed at the end of this video. But she wrote, understanding the neurophysiological process of presence in ourselves, with clients and in relationships, helps us to fine-tune our therapy and our relational skills so that we can activate states of safety, growth, and healing. It assists us as if we look after our own physiology as therapists. It also supports our creative and flexible use of the appropriate technique in response to what is alive in the moment.
Yeah.
I love that word, those words,
Yeah.
unquote. And I think that's something that is interesting when I think about being and the whole polyvagal theory about being at ease or opening the space, and that's when creativeness flows. And in music therapy, it's so important that we have that openness. And if we're too shut or closed or not receptive and not really picking up in the moment what's happening and being present in that space, I think we're missing out on the potential for that creativity.
Yes, definitely. And I think similar in grief and bereavement work, that if we're not really present, we miss the points of significance around a loss or a death that's occurred. You know, we can inadvertently miss things that are actually really critical and important for the person to be able to speak about or grapple with how to live with in our efforts to sort of do something.
Yeah.
And it's often in that state of being present that you allow more room for all that's there. And then, as Sherry Geller says, it often then implies or suggests what might be needed to meet what's there for the person. And that's where your techniques or your approaches can come in. It's like, it feels like, oh, this feels like this is called for.
Yeah.
What happens if we offer that into the space?
And I think that's what helps us become brilliant therapists, is not all the tools we have, but when we choose the right tool for that situation. I think that's the beauty of that.
Yeah.
I think, just to point out, what you're talking about also is that when we're with somebody, we have to look after our own stuff first for whatever comes up. So if we can't sort of work through whatever it is for us in that space, whatever is grief or loss or our own challenges in life or anxiety or whatever, then how can we actually be present with that with people? So it goes back to that whole idea of our self-care. This is outside of that moment with people, but thinking about, like, are we getting supervision?
Yeah.
Are we doing some professional development or some workshopping and things to work out?
Yeah. How do we, I'll go back to that term, how do we create an environment in ourselves so that when we bring that to people, it feels like it's got room, rather than, oh, this person started talking about something and it's activating something of my own stuff. And that starts to take you out of presence here in the present moment and into something of your own. The importance of having space for us to be present to our own experiences of what happens to us in life. And that is probably a nice little segue, like just at the end of this session, like currently we're offering a workshop coming up around for practitioners in the health professions, doesn't matter what sector, to spend some time both looking at being present to each other, but around being with grief and the practitioner's own experiences of grief, and having some space over a weekend that's not the whole weekend, but it's some hours across the weekend, to just be with that and maybe explore. And I think the way we're intending to offer the workshop is have a bit of a flow to how the workshop unfolds, but also having room to be present to each other and bring, yes, some strategies and techniques and some experiences, embodied experiences in, but to see what they feel like, and also when they feel called for, and what happens when we're present to each other. Yeah.
And practice being. And I think that's something that, you know, we say, oh, you can practice your frameworks and you can practice using your frameworks and tools, but have we, like you said in our training, have we ever actually practiced just being? And I think this is an offer that we're putting out there for clinicians, is to have the opportunity to explore that a little bit with their own things, but also in the workshop to better be present in their therapeutic relationships as well. So this conversation has brought about quite a bit of food for thought, not just some food for thought, but I reckon a banquet of food for thought. Including a couple of references that we've leaned on a little bit in this. Of course, there's many more, but we thought we'd focus on a couple of ones that really resonated with, and just streamlined it a little bit for this. But certainly we'll have another conversation in the future about those other qualities and how presence plays a part with other qualities that come about in therapy. Just remembering that these conversations, as you actually saw, they unfold as we discuss, and often we, immediately after this is finished, we go about the way we practice differently, or our thoughts and beliefs about how we practice change and evolve from these conversations. So we welcome your response and opinions and feedback as well, and you can support us by listening and sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.